Hey, Joe.
Hello, good morning.
Have you ever smelled corn before?
No.
No?
Why are you asking?
Didn't you just smell it?
I did.
And what'd you think?
That was backstage. It was floral, it was fruity, much more fragrant than I anticipated. When you think of a row of corn, you see it after the harvest, it looks like this husky, sterile.
Well, and also this is sweet
lovely.
corn, so the flower has a sweet smell. Mm-hmm. And it is. I'm getting some corn husks, some corn stalks. So I am stalking, and I will see some corn come out of this garden. So hi everyone, welcome to my gardens at Freedom Harvest Farms. I'm Aislinn, of course, and behind the screen is Joe over there.
Good morning again.
Good morning. And we are. What I really wanted to talk about this morning is this hands in the dirt learning. Hands in the dirt learning, if you've ever been involved in any of my gardening, anything, or paid attention to any of it, which you probably have because that's why you're here today, then you've heard me say hands in the dirt learning is a hard concept of how I garden. It's the experiment of it. It's the learning. It's the I don't believe the information I'm looking for is out there, and if it is, I personally have the ability, have a better understanding of it kinesthetically if I get my hands in the dirt and learn from it.
You verify it through practice.
Exactly. And so one of the things I said this morning, my mom and I were talking about plants because I helped her get a little perennial plant row, or doing some more flower in her flower bed, putting in some more perennials and turning it into a really nice, abundant perennial plant row in her backyard. So she has this nice, beautiful thing, right? So we've been talking about plants, and I've been talking to her about, well, give this one a try. This is what's happening. Maybe they have too much water. This is how these plants react to water. Oh, they're just grounding in. They're getting, just kind of talking through some of that stuff with her. So she asked me this morning about a pot on my front porch. Because what's that new plant on your front porch? I said, oh, the sick one. That's a mandevilla. It was over on that one porch, and we buy things around here for, number one, aesthetics. We need to put a plant in a certain place, and then eventually we know that that plant's going to have to go in the ground. But in the meantime, the decoration, the chickens in the tunnels, and one of them's always picking on the other ones, and it makes a big scene in the tunnel. And so what is the purpose of this plant, and what are we learning from it? So it's a mandevilla, and it was over on one porch on a specific event day, but it didn't like it there because it wasn't getting enough attention. It didn't get any water, right? Then I move it over to another porch where I'm going to take better care of it, but that porch is dark, and this particular plant actually likes to be outside with lots of sun and maybe not a ton of water. A little bit tropical, so like floods and then droughts, and then droughts.
We were in a downtown hangout spot, and you saw some of them.
And they looked gorgeous.
Right.
And they're in a bar scene where they're not spending a lot of time on those plants. So that's some things to look for. What are the plants that are not looking for my time, but they need direct sun, they need some of these things. And so my response to her really about that is, and her saying she wanted another bottle brush plant. My response to her about all of that was, I've killed one of everything at our local nurseries. And so that is the lead into saying, like, I should have that as a brand for how I hands in the dirt learning. I am not afraid to kill a plant. I am not afraid to, I take my livestock management, my animal management a bit differently because their lives, for whatever reason, have a higher sense of value to me. Right? Okay, but we're talking about the plants in the garden, and I'm going to kill a lot of plants in order to learn how it works. So in addition to that, I say all of that to say what I wanted to do was show you around this new garden. You've seen some of the other gardens I've gone through. You've seen that those gardens are a year to a year and a half old. This garden was built in March. And it's going to take me with the style of growth that I do here on the farm, the way that I like to create my growing spaces, my garden spaces, is A, let it live, top priority, let it live. B, know what's actually living, good, bad, right, wrong, know what's actually living, all the diversity that's going on. And the last thing is learn the sustainability of it, the true energetic balance of it, to where you understand how the plants most develop on their own without your support. okay? So that's how I grow, which means that I'm going to have to learn with my hands in the dirt how to create how to invest in my land and learn my land in order to invest in my land long enough to get it to where it does that. So this takes several seasons, several years. It is an investment, and it is an investment of time, labor, energetic balance, all of those types of things. And a brand new garden that you are moving in season for season, you can look at different gardens and the age of that garden and what has grown in that garden, and you can see what's doing well, what's not doing well, what can we do more of. But then you also have to take into consideration in the hands in the dirt learning part of the process, what's happening with the weather. Because the weather this May is different than it was last May. We had a lot of rain by now already. We had some floods already out here by now. So even that is a different thing. So no matter what someone gives you in terms of information on some sort of a YouTube video or a live on Facebook or whatever the different types of things that people are coaching, you will never be able to learn it yourself unless you do it yourself. And you look at it and you take everything, every failure, not as a failure, but every failure as an experience, an opportunity to learn from it. And so that's what we're doing out here in the garden. And I wanted to show you around because one of the things I wanted to say is, well, I harvested potatoes from here, okay? And I would say I probably harvested from this one row and section Yukon Gold potatoes. I probably harvested about 25, 30 pounds. I haven't weighed them all. I will eventually. And then I just started harvesting this one, and I would say I probably harvested, at this point, there's still some to be harvested, some nice big plants that are still healthy, and I've got some things I'm dealing with down there at the end with some fire ants. So I don't know what's going on down there. This one didn't produce as well as this one. This one was red potatoes, which produced really well on that side. White potatoes, and then the blue or the purple potatoes on that side. The white and the blue didn't produce as well as the red. So here's some experimenting. Yukon Golds, quite well. I would have loved to have seen them better. I needed to put more water out here. I'm learning that now. As I soak and soak and soak, I'm seeing the plants are doing better as I put more water on there. And that is this drought season that I'm dealing with this season compared to last season's flooding season, right? So those are some experiments that you can see. Oh, so I would say 25, 30 pounds, 15, 20 pounds so far is what I've come up with. I'm not happy with that in terms of return on the investment, but I'm learning. This is a first season. I've had seasons, Joe, you remember in the backyard garden, brand new garden spaces where I was just like, this garden is literally producing nothing. Like, it's here, it's kind of growing.
It's pretty.
Kind of, like in that season it wasn't even, and it was the very first season of that garden. And I just kept saying, but have faith, because in a few more seasons, the perfect water is going to come in, and this ground is going to have been more balanced in its own energetic ability to maintain life, etc.
Balance the term that you were disappointed in that potato harvest with what you said at the top of today's video. Everything is a learning experience. There really is no failure when you look at it that way.
No, and it did produce. It just, I want it to be even more abundant than that.
I've got a question. I'm going to have a lot of questions today because since that's our house right there. So since this one is so close, and since I can come out here when I get the eggs, and I get the eggs every day, and take a look at this garden in a way that I don't look at the gardens up front as often, I feel more personally invested in the story of this garden because I've been, watching it. This, you said, was your first time to plant this garden.
Yep.
I was amazed at how quickly everything popped up.
There was a lot of good fertilizer in the soil. So everything came up green. Boom, green. Okay, now we've got to get from green to flower, through the hatch of the pests, to the fruit, without water.
So when you planted this for the first time, as you say, these 2 rows were specifically potatoes.
Yes. They were specifically potatoes. And the other thing to note in terms of my experimenting, my journaling, whatever I'm doing for this, is that these 2 particular potato rows were potatoes that I bought from one of the box stores, as opposed to getting potatoes from Texas to grow in Texas. because that's the wisest way to do it, is get it as close as you can to where you are, the seed whatever you're using. And the seed potato from our local area, onions from our local area, you know, things like that. Anything we can get from our area, our seeds from here, they're going to do better here because they're more acclimated to what we're, and the thing is that the growers that are seeding and selling those are going to do the ones that are the most prolific, the ones that are the most abundant.
Sure.
So the red potato.
They've done that hands in the dirt learning already, and that's the potatoes they've landed on.
And there's also, you know, the schools, the agricultural science and schools and the universities that are teaching them things to use. It's a matter of, like, that side of it, learning from the experience of growers and ag science majors and things like that is extremely important. The thing is that you have to be able to discern what is your path in terms of sustainability, you know? And so that information, I mean, Dixondale Farms is growing 1015s and Vidalias and red creoles, and those are the short day onions, and those are the ones that are going to grow the best in Texas. And so there's not a whole, I mean, we can experiment. That's the hands in the dirt learning. And this is the thing that I'm constantly telling people. It's like, listen to everything I say. You can ignore it all. Play with it. That's hands in the dirt learning. And so what you do is, if your goal is, I'm trying to get sustainable, then you need to be able to understand how to get the least expensive, most productive garden growing to get food inside your home as easy as possible, as sustainably as possible. However, playing with different things means you will learn what your property does well and what different seasons will do well. And in addition to that, you begin to create different types of interconnected ecosystems because there's all kinds of variety of plants. So that's what we're doing in terms of learning how this all stuff works. So here's an example of, I bought these as soon as I saw them at our local nursery, at Turner's. Turner's is where I get most of my plants from. And I got them early because I know how things happen, how fast. By the time I got this garden built and was ready to get more to plant in there, they didn't have any more. They were out. Everybody had gotten their potatoes, which is a, you know, silly mistake that every gardener should be better at, whatever. Okay, fine. But look at the difference between these. This is still growing. It's still green. I mean, yes, there's some die-off, but there's still so much of it that's actually green. So there's two things to keep in mind here. One, this was planted like an entire week before those. Two, this one actually gets more water. Why does it get more water? Because it's down here on the end, and I spray it with water every time I'm over here with a hose, right? So, and it's the local nursery's potatoes that they are getting from the closest place and the most inexpensive place that they can get it from, so that they can resell it to me for a price that I'm willing to pay for it, as opposed to the box store things that I purchase.
You taking questions today?
Absolutely.
Okay, because a big glut of folks just showed up.
Sure.
You're showing off this backyard garden that you said you planted in March?
Yes, I started this garden in March, and it's the first season garden, and so it looks very different currently from my other gardens, because this one, and the conversation really is this concept of hands in the dirt learning, which is super important. So, okay, so then I'm talking about the yield. We're talking about the corn flour that has a smell to it. I'm getting down on the ground and looking in at things and saying, okay, well, what's working in here and what's not working in here? And I do have squash, like a vining squash that seems to still be doing pretty good. It's trying to put on flowers. It looks like this area is actually doing better than some of the other areas because I turned on and soaked everything, but then left it on super low overnight, and it soaked this area really well. Now I'm pulling from well water, so that's another thing I have to keep in mind about this garden compared to other gardens. And half of one garden is our cooperative garden group that we pay to, city water basically, and then the other half is well water. But this garden is 100% well water. My well water on the coast of the Gulf of Mexico has more salt in it, potentially, than I want to put on my gardens all of the time. And I want to put on young plants all of the time. So these are all things I have to look at with my hands in the dirt, because yes, it's going to keep my cost of water down.
Mm-hmm. And
but,
in a drought, you look for that.
But if I've got no water at all and all I'm putting on it is salty water, and it's not so salty to cause massive problems, otherwise we wouldn't be doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's enough for me to not want to even ingest it as it's not my safe water for, what do you call water inside? It is potable water. It's not our potable water, right? So
does it taste saline?
You know, I haven't really thought about it, honestly. But look, over here you can see I've got a spaghetti squash that is actually doing really well over here. And the plant is just kind of hanging out inside here. And the stalk is really, you know, firm and nice. And you can see that I am putting corn on. So there is production coming out of this garden. This particular area over here was the first area to begin fruiting. So I've got beans and squash coming off of this one. But this was the area that was the most soaked. So it's actually still producing well. But if you think about things, if you're thinking about the hands in the dirt learning of this, when did it start flowering compared to when we had gotten to the point where it was like, it's starting to become 90 degrees sometimes and we still haven't had any water. So the flowers and the fruits aren't going to do well if they haven't already gotten a well-established plant to be happy and to be able to do that for. That doesn't mean that we're not going to continue to have a good summer that still has some rain, and that we still are able to get more fruits, and that we get enough yield off of things. So we don't stop experimenting with the season. I've got, you know, cantaloupe plants, and this is one that I'm not certain is going to make it, but that's why I put it there. So then let me say why I said that, because I just said something out loud that I should say if I'm going to say it. And that is, I'm looking at this space and going, this looks like this plant's going to maintain, this one might. This is probably going to maintain, those both look like they're going to maintain. Those things look really good down there, okay? So if this one dies, I'm not super concerned about it. But I'm going to go ahead and get it in the ground because it's clearly mature enough to want to try to start putting flowers on. So there's all of these types of things that are occurring when I think about, well, as I move through the season of hands in the dirt and development of this new garden, I'm trying to get as much production off of it as possible. We talked about on the podcast yesterday my peas. I would love it if you guys would go over and listen to the podcast that launches tomorrow, where I talk about this same type of concept as it relates to a good season of sugar snap peas, but maybe a week or two too late. How do I always make sure that I turn that into some sort of production that I can use that gives me back some return on these early investments that seem to be a little unbalanced, which makes you want to stop doing it and go do something else, or shift back to the way that's not going to create that long-term sustainability, because that's what I'm looking for. And it's very hard to have those types of conversations in today's world because we're so impatient. We want convenience. We want it now. We want it fast. And we invested a bunch of money. If we're talking about large-scale production farming or even small-scale production farming,
sure,
we invested a bunch of money. We need that money to come back so that we can keep the cash flow. So that's all we're looking at here in these early stages of sustainability with these gardens, is the energetic flow. We're looking for that balance. We've got to get it as quickly as we can into a place where it's balancing each other, but that's going to take time. How do we keep cash flow during that time? And that's part of the hands in the dirt learning of it. That's part of the experiment of it. That's part of the understanding that I'm going to kill one of every plant before I even get to the point where I can even understand what that plant really wants. And on this property, what does it want? And in this space that I have, what does it want? And as I develop each new little nook and cranny, what does it want? And so that feels overwhelming unless you see it as an experimental game, a science experiment, which is the way I look at it, is the way I see it. And it's the way that I try to inspire people, is to say, this is a great opportunity. It's beautiful outside. We're learning about weather. We're learning about things that are going to help our wellness, and we do it all outside while we smell cornflowers. I don't know why I'm so impressed with the way cornflowers smell, but all my life I've never smelled cornflower, and now I'm like, la la la, walking through the garden, I'm like, oh, it's the corn. Oh, the corn smells so good.
So here you are flooding again.
Yes, it needs to be moved, by the way, too. So, and I turned it up really high. This is not how high it was when I left it on overnight. When I leave something on, like I might, and let's be real, an accidental leave on, but yet I wasn't really worried about it because I know what's going on back here in the back. So this is what I was doing the other day. A very, very low leave on, like that. And then it just drips and drips and drips and drips and fills and drips. It's challenging to water well a garden like this, and the reason is because it grows a lot of mold. It's close, and that's some of the challenges of the way that the companion planting and this very, very interplanted, tight niche planting is understanding how to water it in a way that it can stay healthy till you get it to a point where it can maintain some of its own water and some of its own moisture. This ground is brand new broken ground. It does not have the structure that the other gardens have in them. Mm-hmm. And those other gardens are 18 months old, 12 months old. So that gives you the idea of kind of some of the movement and the shift. Now, am I producing as abundantly over there as I'm producing over here potentially? Actually, I would say it's probably equal. Here's the difference in terms of sustainability. I spend a lot less time in those other gardens because I don't need to. And I could, if I chose to, harvest more from those gardens, get a lot more production out of that garden. I just don't want to spend my time doing that all of the time. Or don't have the time to spend my time doing that all of the time. And so those are the types of things that you learn in terms of sustainability. Like, what do you want to do? Do you want to harvest 8,000 tiny little edible flowers all the time and then get them in shipment and send them to Maine? Maine wouldn't be a good example because they would grow their own flowers in Maine. But you know what I'm talking about. No, I don't really want to spend my time doing that. I'd rather spend my time working on getting to know a new garden. And that's where I'm going to invest my labor energy this season as I learn. And in the middle of that, I've got a brand new garden that's putting on tomatoes and beans and yard-long beans and peas and Swiss chard.
You put these two trellises up on this end of the garden because this is the primary wind flow. That was one of the reasons, was to attempt to create a wind block. I'm sure the corn, the way that it's grown, also creates a wind block for the rows further down. Yep. How happy are you with the trellising system down here?
Well, I think that the trellising system is very good in that the plants are doing really well over here. They're very healthy. And
there are plants, of course, that require a trellis to grow correctly.
Yes, I actually think that the way this trellising is positioned, the types of plants that are growing in it, the fact that it's getting a lot of wind blowing on it, but I can still get in here and soak it and very lightly water the bottom parts of it, and just to give it a little bit more, that it's actually doing really well because of the way it's built. So the style of this trellising, based on where it is in the sun and based on where it is in the wind, is actually doing really well. So these are the types of hands in the dirt learning things. It's like, oh, this works. Okay, and the thing is it's very interplanted also. So it's not like it's, you know, oh, well, it's because I did only this or whatever. I've got sweet peppers, tomatoes, some kind of pumpkin or squash, a squash, some zucchini, I think, tomatoes, clearly, eggplants, some more squash. And I showed y'all what I had over there a little bit, but then over here, see, this is what I want. Before we get to the days of where we're having overnight 85-degree temperature, that's the thing that people get a little bit confused about when it comes to the tomato production. It's when we're sustaining 85 degrees, meaning we don't go below that anymore. And that's for like maybe 6 or 8 weeks in the summertime, maybe longer than that. No, probably about 6 or 8 weeks in the summertime. What do you think? I'm asking you a question. I'm asking that with inquisitive.
It's hot all summer. I don't
Okay,
know.
well
I'm
then,
gonna pay attention.
Okay,
this year,
let's pay
though.
attention this year,
Yeah.
right? So let's everyone pay attention. I've begun paying more attention to it because
85 is a magic number.
yes, because when we don't go below 85, we stop making flowers on our tomatoes and other fruiting plants. All of our fruiting plants stop flowering. Not all. I think eggplants might still, but really I think all fruiting plants stop flowering. Let's look it up. I'll do an unanswered question for that one. But here's the thing, is that as long as it's still staying in that great temperature range, all of these flowers are going to continue to keep setting fruit. So I've got these tomato plants over here, and then I've got tomato plants and eggplants and pepper plants on the other side over there. And I've got all kinds of cucumbers and things like that growing in those other gardens as well. But you can see the variety. This is some cowpeas that I just threw in from last season. So we need to get in here and do a little bit of cleaning because this is an edge. That's one thing you guys know, as I've talked about in the other gardens, any garden beds that are right on the edge are the ones that are harder to maintain from that Bermuda grass that's going to crawl up inside there. Down inside the center of those rows, I've been able to, hold on, let me come back to that thought. This is a cantaloupe, another pepper here. I've got some basil starting to come up now, more cantaloupe, some okra over there on the other side, okra, squash, all kinds of things going on like that. So here's what I'm doing about some of the, ooh, that one did good. It got all the way to here. That's what I wanted.
Water.
Yeah. Okay. So this is what I'm doing about some of the Bermuda grass.
Yeah, I'm going
help.
to start over here inside this little kind of portable coop. We have 4 to 5 chickens that we bring over from our main run. These are our volunteers. They get water, a little bit of feed, but otherwise we're relying on them to clean the grass. This tunnel system, your dad built a couple of them, I built a couple of them. Your dad built this great corner so that
we can do these kinds of
we
things.
can
and
shoot
get
it all the
basically
way down
wherever
those
we want.
rows. And then
So-
the chickens are doing the work of the weeding, leaving you time to grow.
Well, the other option would be just to weed eat it down, which is what I tell clients when they ask me, what do I do? I'm like, well, first of all, the best that you can, keeping those rows soaked like I'm doing. Every single time you see a new Bermuda grass or some weed that you don't want there coming up, just pull it out, like right away. Just as soon as you see it, pull it out, pull it out, pull it out. But that's part of that, is keeping enough moisture in your soil that you can easily pull it out, right? And that depends on how much money you want to spend on water and how much water you want to put in, how much time you want to spend on the water and all of that, and whether there's enough return on investment to that. Because the other answer is weed eating. You go into your gardens and you literally bare skin all the way down. That's what he needs to do right there for me, is like, well, I can't do it now because it's soaking wet. But over here, it would come back in close up to the edge of it and bear it down all the way with the weeds. And then we just keep covering it up with mulch. And what I've learned is, in some places, it works really well to keep stuff out. In other places, it's going to continue to keep growing back up again. But that's the advantage of having the chickens. So like as soon as I get them through at least doing every row over here once, I need to move this back over into my super busy. They're picking on that girl all the time. They always pick on her. Every time she's in here, they pick on her. That's probably why she learned to fly out of the run over there.
She's the lowest on the pecking order.
I guess so, because they're always picking on her in here over there. So anyways, I don't remember what I was talking about, but
Talking about getting the dirt, getting the Bermuda grass
yeah,
out
so
with
I
weed
can
eating.
move the chicken run over there, and down inside my garden where it's really hard to weed eat because I've got all kinds of things growing inside there. And I've created, like, because it's so enclosed, I've created a place where it kind of holds moisture, right? Inside of the garden, it's going to hold more moisture. The best answer for me is literally to let my chickens go on there. But it's the same thing. You can still go in there and just kind of learn what spaces and how is easiest to clean. I also have talked over the years about using different kinds of knife or serrated edge weeding tools to take out some of that stuff, especially when you get one of those big clump grasses, like the stuff that they plant for animals. Maybe it's time to take her out of there. They seem to be being very mean to her.
You're talking about Pepper? Or potentially Pepper?
Oh!
Because
We've
that's
been
not
naming that chicken on the podcast.
Yes. You
I
can go
think
to
he
our...
might have leaked just then.
No, there's no leak. That's just my favorite name of the ones that are available to vote on. Go to our Facebook page for Dinner Table Talks right now, and you can vote at the top of the page. But that's not who's fighting over here.
But she's getting the one getting chased off, right?
It's her right there. She's the one.
She's getting picked
The one
on?
in the door is the one that's getting abused.
Oh. Okay.
Chicken politics, man.
I know.
Worse
Good
than...
grief. No, not worse.
Yeah, never mind.
No,
I
humans
stopped.
are definitely worse.
And then tomorrow, the podcast that releases tomorrow, we talk about bees.
We do. So it's a good episode to listen to because we're talking about the farm a lot and we're talking about some of those sustainable concepts and spending some really good time. And I spent some time talking about the family farm camp that Larry Joe Edwards and I are doing together. She's a naturalist, a master naturalist, and has a company where she teaches families how to observe nature, and then of course here at the farm we do all kinds of cool stuff. So I'll talk about that on there as well. But if you have questions about Family Farm Camp, one in June, one in July, you should reach out to me because it's going to be awesome and we're very excited about doing it. So that's really all I have for today. I love you all very much. I'm so grateful to have you to talk to every Sunday morning. It makes my day and my week much better. I'll see you soon. Bye.